Well, it's great to be back with you for another session. And I'd like to begin today by reminding us of what we looked at yesterday. Yesterday we saw how Islam prepares Muslims for Christianity in quite a comprehensive way, and that this is both a challenge to the church to know its doctrine and to know its history, but also a great opportunity. And I suggested to you that a way that we can use this preparation that Islam gets is by simply asking our Muslim friend, what have you heard about Christianity? What have you been taught? Remembering that they're meant to learn about Christianity, and so just asking them, what have you heard, what have you been taught, and then just listening to them, finding out where they're coming from. And as I said, you don't try to answer them or correct them in any way, you just listen to what they've got to say. But then I did say, and I finished with this yesterday, I did say that you then say to them, can I tell you one thing about Christianity? Can I tell you one thing? So you've listened to them, you've found out what they've heard about Christianity, and then you say, can I show you one thing about Christianity? And the thing I'd like to show Muslims is what books are in the Bible. What books are in the Bible? And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to explain why you want to show them what books are in the Bible. So we're going to do a bit of work now to get to that point of what books are in the Bible. And it begins with thinking about how we introduce the gospel differently to different people. So for instance, in the book of Acts, the Apostle Paul, when he's evangelizing in the synagogues, introduces the gospel by beginning with the Old Testament stories, talking about the history of Israel and the promises that God made to the nation of Israel. He uses that as his introduction to then talk about Jesus and explain who Jesus is and what Jesus has done. However, later in that chapter, when we see Paul in Athens, he introduces the gospel in a very different way. He sees the city full of idols, and he begins with an altar to an unknown God. And he says, what you worship is unknown, I'm going to proclaim to you. So he begins with their altar, and then he talks about God being the creator. He talks about idolatry as not representing God, and says that God's true representative is Jesus, who is resurrected and is the Lord and Judge of all. And so you can see there that Paul introduces the gospel in different ways to different people. It's the one gospel he's introducing, but he has different introductions to it. And so one of the questions I've had is, how would Paul introduce the gospel to Muslims? How would Paul introduce the gospel to Muslims? Because they're not Jews with that Old Testament history. And they're not idol worshippers. They don't set up idols in the way that you see in other places. So they don't fit neatly into either of those categories. So how should we introduce the gospel to Muslims? Now, it's not too hard to see what the Apostle Paul is doing. He's looking at the religious culture of the people he's speaking to and using that as a starting point and taking it on board as a way of introducing the gospel. So what is it about the Islamic religious culture that we need to think about? What would be a starting point in the Islamic culture that we could use to introduce the gospel? I want to suggest to you that there are two important beliefs that Muslims have that we need to take into account. The first belief is that Muslims are taught to believe in all the prophets. And I'm sure that for those of you who have met a Muslim, you've probably had your Muslim friend say this to you. They'll say something like, I believe in Jesus. You cannot be a Muslim unless you love Jesus and all the prophets. Muslims believe in all the prophets. And I've given you a Bible verse that you could look up there. where this idea comes out. And so this is one of the central tenets of Islam, that Muslims are to believe in all the prophets. And when you speak to them, they'll say, we believe in all the prophets. We believe in Jesus already. You know, we believe in Moses. We believe in David. We believe in Jonah. We believe in Job. We believe in John the Baptist. We believe in all those prophets. Now, what's the result of this? Well, the result of this belief is that on some occasions, it may make them open to discussing Jesus and those prophets with you and listening to what you have to say. It may make you open, and so you want to explore that to see if they're open. You say, oh, you believe in the prophets? No, let's talk about them. But very often, because they're convinced they believe all the prophets, it actually stops them from listening to us. Because what they will say is, I already believe in all the prophets. I already believe in Jesus. You're coming to me to talk about Jesus. I already believe in him. I already have Allah's word about Jesus. I already believe in him. It may be like someone, like a Mormon coming to speak to you and saying, you know, I want to tell you about Jesus. You would say, well, I already believe in Jesus. I don't need you to tell me. And so they may not listen to you because they think, well, I already believe in all the prophets. In fact, they may actually be thinking, I need to convert you and give you the true understanding of Jesus. So you can see there that their belief that they believe all the prophets most of the time actually stops them from listening to us. So we've got to think about that. How are we going to deal with that? Now, the second belief they have, which I think we need to consider, is that it is very common for Muslims to be taught that the Bible has been changed, the Bible's corrupt. This is not what the Quran teaches at all, but this is a popular teaching within Islam which explains a number of things for them. And of course, for us who are Bible-believing Christians who want to share the gospel message and minister the word of God, if there's a person and a civilization which is being taught that the Bible's been changed and it's not reliable, that's obviously difficult for us, isn't it? It's difficult for introducing the gospel. Where the gospel we're introducing to them, they're going to say, well, that comes from your book, which has been changed. In fact, very often just saying the word Bible to a Muslim mind can start an argument. Because you will say the word Bible and they'll say, well, I've heard about the Bible, I know about it. They may not say this to you, but if they've been receiving any Islamic teaching, that they will have thought about the Bible and been taught things about it. And so you may find that they may even be suspicious of the Bible just from their teaching. So we've got these two beliefs. Muslims believe all the prophets. This is what they say to us. They say, we already believe all the prophets, and so we don't need to listen to you. And the Bible's been changed, and so we don't really need to listen to you. These, I want to suggest, are two important beliefs that we need to consider. Now, what does this mean for how we introduce the gospel to Muslims? I want to suggest that it means we have to introduce the gospel in such a way that it shows Muslims they do not believe the prophets. Right? We need to introduce the gospel in such a way that it shows Muslims they do not believe the prophets, and we need to make the Bible intriguing and surprising to them so that they will reconsider what they've been taught about it. I think that's what we've got to do. I think that's the issue we need to sort out in making a good introduction. We need to show Muslims they don't actually believe the prophets, and we need to make the Bible intriguing and surprising and interesting so that they'll reconsider what they've been taught about it. Now, as it turns out, it's actually really easy to do that. It's really easy to do that, and you already have the tools to do this. You already have the tools to do this. So, how is it that we can do it? Well, we do it by, first of all, understanding the Quran and the Bible. What is the Quran? The Quran is a collection of what Muhammad recited and he claimed came from the angel Gabriel. He recited it, and it was collected up over time and put into the Quran. So that's what the Quran is. It's a collection of what Muhammad recited. Now, you need to know that because Muslims will say that they believe all the prophets, but when you read the Quran, you do not find any of the books of the prophets in the Quran. You only find what Muhammad said in the Quran. So if you go and look in the Quran, you will not find the book of Genesis. If you look in the Quran, you will not find the Psalms, you will not find Isaiah, you will not find Matthew. All you will find is Muhammad and what Muhammad recited. So what is it that Muslims mean when they say they believe the prophets? What they mean is they believe everything Muhammad tells them about the prophets. So when a Muslim says to you, I believe in Moses, what they mean is they believe everything Muhammad said about Moses. When a Muslim says to you, I believe in David, what they mean is, I believe everything Muhammad tells me about David. When a Muslim says to you, I believe in Jesus, what they mean is, they believe everything Muhammad tells them about Jesus. You see, Islam is the religion of one man and his opinion on the prophets and who they were and what their message was. In fact, in the religion of Islam, the way it works is it says, we believe all the prophets, but do not read them. Muhammad will just tell you what they're about. Just think about that. It's a religion where you just listen to one man telling you what the prophets are about. Islam is the religion of one man. Now, in this way, Islam is identical to the Baha'i religion. The Baha'i religion comes many hundreds of years after Islam. But in the Baha'i religion, if you're familiar with it, they have their own prophet, a man named Baha'u'llah. And in the Baha'i religion, they believe all the prophets. You cannot be a Baha'i unless you love all of the prophets. And so the Baha'i, they accept Muhammad as a prophet, they accept Jesus as a prophet, they accept Moses as a prophet, they accept all of the prophets. But they only believe about them what their prophet says about those prophets. Now, of course, Muslims don't accept this. They say, no, you just can't listen to someone else tell you about our prophet. But that's exactly what Muslims do to the prophets. They just listen to one man, Muhammad, and what he says about the prophets. Islam and the Baha'i religion are actually the same type of religion. They are one man telling you what to believe about the other prophets and not asking you to read them for yourself. So I don't want you to be deceived. Muslims believe in the prophets in name alone. The one they actually believe is Muhammad. That's just the religion, that's just a fact. They believe Muhammad and what he says about the prophets. Now, what about Christianity? What about the Bible? Well, the Bible is not one book. It's a collection of many books from many prophets over about a 1500-year period. It has the law of Moses, the books of the prophets, Psalms of David, the gospel and the books that come with the gospels, the letters of the apostles. It's not from one man, is it? It's actually very different. So in Christianity, we don't have one person saying to us, don't read all the Old Testament, don't read all these other books, just listen to me and I'll tell you what they mean. Because that's what Islam's like. But we don't do that, do we? We've actually taken, the church has taken the harder option of saying we have to read in our churches all of the prophets. And this was particularly an issue in the early church with a man named Marcion who wanted to get rid of the Old Testament and other writings in the New Testament. And the early church just went, no, we read all of the prophets. That's the Christian faith. You see, if you do not believe a prophet if you don't listen to them. You do not believe a prophet if you do not listen to them. Jesus actually rebukes people for believing in his miracles and being amazed at his miracles, but not listening to what he had to say. So they believed in Jesus, they just didn't want to listen to what he had to say. If you don't listen to a prophet, you do not believe them. It is Christians who are the ones who actually believe the prophets in practice. We're the ones who believe the prophets. Now, we can just take this for granted. We can take this for granted. I had a Muslim man once come to church, and we were having a sermon on the Psalms, and he said to me, "Why are you having a sermon on the Psalms?" And I said, "Well, we're just doing the Psalms at the moment at church." And he said, No. Why are you having a sermon on the Psalms?" And I said, "Well, that's just where we're up to in the Bible." And he goes, "The Psalms have got nothing to do with Christianity." Now, he had no idea what was in the Bible. He thought the Psalms were just some book of David for back in David's time. He didn't actually know that we read all these books, and it was amazing to him. So we mustn't take it for granted that we read all of these prophets. This is actually an amazing thing that we do as Christians. It's an odd thing that we're reading the books of the Jewish religion, that we read the Law of Moses, that we read Isaiah and Jeremiah. I assume you just take that for granted. Don't take it for granted. That is the testimony that you believe all the prophets and that your religion is based in all of the prophets. It's an amazing thing. The Bible is an outstanding book. This collection of prophets over 1,500 years. There's nothing else like it. It's completely different to the Quran. So, how can you show Muslims that they do not believe the prophets and that we do? Well, you show the difference between the Bible and the Quran. And this is why your first Bible study I'm suggesting with a Muslim is the table of contents. The table of contents. For many Christians, the page of shame. The page where we have to, just secretly show that we have to look up to find where Zephaniah is. It's an amazing page. The table of contents is an exciting page of the Bible to a Muslim. It's an exciting page because what does it show? It shows all the prophets that we read. It shows all the prophets that we read. It's a summary of the prophets. And again, this is something that you can do, isn't it? You already have this tool. It's at the front of your Bible. You can already do this. And so my suggestion is that you go to the table of contents and explain what the Bible is. And so we introduce the gospel by explaining what the Bible is first. We explain what the Bible is before we invite them to read it, and we do this from the table of contents. And we help to remove the impression that they believe all the prophets. And I believe that this makes it very interesting to Muslims, and it stops them from thinking that the Bible's been changed because they're now seeing it in a different light. So, here is my application. You're with your Muslim friend and you want to have a gospel conversation, so you say to them, "What have you heard about Christianity? What have you been told?" And you just listen to what they've got to say. You listen to what they've got to say. You don't try to correct them. You just listen to them, find out who they are and where they're coming from. Then, once they've had their opportunity to explain things to you, you say, "Can I show you one thing about Christianity?" And I've always had them say yes. And so you say, "Can I show you what books are in the Bible?" And then you take them to the table of contents. And so when you're in the table of contents, what do you do? What do you do? Well, I would suggest that you show them some of the prophets that they already know. So you could show them Moses, and you could say, "Have you heard of Moses, Musa?" And they're most likely going to say, yes, I've heard of Moses. We know about Moses. And you could say, well, here's the law of Moses, and show them Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and say, this is the law of Moses. We read this as Christians. Have you heard of David? Dawood? And they're most likely going to say yes. Take them to the Psalms of David, and show them and say, as Christians, we read the Psalms of David. You can do the same with Job, with Jonah, showing them that the prophets that they know about, that the Bible actually has the books of those prophets, and that you as a Christian read them. Now, you can also show them some prophets that they don't know. Prophets like Isaiah and Ezekiel and Jeremiah and Malachi and all those other prophets there. There's a whole range of them. Just to show them that the horizon's a bit bigger than they may have thought. That there's a lot of other books of prophets out there that they don't even know about, and that you as a Christian are just reading. So you explain those books, and you demonstrate from the table of contents the prophets that you read. The next point then is to explain how the Bible and the Quran are different at this point. And so you can simply say something like, can you see how the Bible and the Quran are different at this point? The Bible is the collection of many prophets, whereas the Quran is just Muhammad and what he recited, what he said. Can you see how they're different? And take them through that process of seeing how they're different. And then you want to show them how, from your perspective, Muslims don't really believe the prophets, they believe Muhammad. Whereas it's the Christians who believe the prophets because we read them. So this is the next question you bring up. You say, who is it then who really believes the prophets? It looks like you believe Muhammad and what he says about the prophets. You know, I'm the one who's reading them. I'm the one who believes the prophets. And so you need to talk about who actually believes the prophets. Now you need to slow down at this point. You might think, I'll deal with this point and then I want to get on with something else more important. I want to say to you, this is a big point. This is actually really important. And you do not want to rush it. Because once they accept that they believe Muhammad alone, and they don't actually believe all the prophets, they just believe Muhammad, and that you believe all the prophets, that changes a lot. That changes the basis for them rejecting having to listen to you. This now makes the Bible interesting and surprising to them. There's a lot of things that come out of this shift. And so if all you do in your first meeting is get them to understand that they follow Muhammad and you read all of the prophets and you believe all the prophets, that's a great place to get in that meeting. And you've laid a good foundation for what's to come. Now, sometimes they might respond and say, well, okay, the Bible does have those prophets in it, but they're corrupted. They're corrupted. And so this is just the default the answer they give to when they have no answer. Right? When Muslims say the Bible's corrupted, it's the answer they give when they don't have an answer. And so if they say, oh, the Bible's corrupted, you just need to just gently say, look, you're changing the subject there, because even if the Bible was corrupted, you still only follow one man. It's not that if the Bible's corrupted, you all of a sudden believe all the prophets. No, you follow one man. So, we can talk about the Bible and its corruption later on. So that's the point I think you want to do. You want to explain how the Bible and the Quran are different and help them to understand how you follow all the prophets and they just follow one man. Now, there are some leaflets that can help you with this. You've got these in your notes and you can download them from the website. This is a short leaflet called What is the Bible? And you can print that out and give that to them. So if you're doing walk-up evangelism or want to have some leaflets at church where Muslims may come in, this is the type of leaflet that you could give to them. And it's just a very short leaflet explaining sort of the things that I've been saying here. This is how I would introduce the gospel to a Muslim, by explaining what the Bible is and showing how it is all the prophets and it's Christians who believe all the prophets. And then I would invite them to read Matthew's Gospel. I'd give them one of these or some other tool. You obviously can give them whatever you like, but I've found that Matthew's Gospel really speaks to Muslims for a whole range of reasons, which we'll go into later on. So, that's the way that I suggest introducing the gospel to Muslims and getting to give your gospel presentation. And I hope you can see that what I've tried to do here is to give you a method that does not require you knowing about Islam. Remember what we saw yesterday in the previous session? We saw that Islam's not mentioned in the Bible, and so we need to think through how do we learn about Islam? How do we present the gospel to Muslims when they're not spoken about in the Bible? And what I've tried to do here is to give you an approach that only requires you to learn Christianity, to know your own faith, but learn how to present your own faith in a way that is meaningful to Muslims. So in summary, if you meet a Muslim and you wish to have a gospel conversation, you say to them, what have you heard about Christianity? And you listen to them. You find out where they're coming from. You don't try to correct them. And then you say, can I show you one thing about Christianity? You say, can I show you what books are in the Bible? You go to the table of contents and show that the Bible has all of the prophets in it and the Quran is just one man. And you explain how Christians are the ones who believe all the prophets. And then you invite them to come and read the prophets that they say they believe in. And then you introduce them to Jesus through the gospel. Amen. We'll finish there.